And here we go. Jack Powers. Hello, everybody. Listen, couple of issues I just wanted to catch up on because the Supreme Court made a couple of, I think, astounding and very far-reaching decisions last Friday. So I just wanted to catch up on a couple of those. First is overturning Chevron or limiting the application of Chevron. So yeah, Chevron has been the main defense of the executive branch. Any kind of department or administration has always used the Chevron decision. And the Chevron decision simply says this. It says the courts, all of the courts, are going to give deference, meaning they're going to let the agency decide on its own, under its own regulations, etc., and so on any decision that agency makes, and that later is challenged. So when we were talking about, when I was arguing the case that the executive department, i.e. the Bureau of Prisons, had no jurisdiction under Article 3, the separation of powers, it had no power of or authority to determine a sentence. This was my question. It went to the Supreme Court and certiorari was granted. However, right before the arguments or final briefs, I think actually the final briefs were in the process of being filed. But what happened was the Supreme Court then cut it loose on a technicality, just said it was, I guess, improvidentially granted. But the argument was that the Federal Bureau of Prisons has no power, no authority to determine what the actual sentence is. In my case, the Bureau of Prisons had taken sentences that were required to be run concurrently, that is, together at the same time. Like if I had a 2 to 4 sentence on this charge and a 2-year to 4-year sentence on that charge, I would only serve 2 to 4 because both of them would be together. I'd be serving that time on each of them together. So it would only be 2 years to 4 years. The judge, in my case, or not the judge, but the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the judge ordered them to run like this. The Federal Bureau of Prisons came in and said, no, the judge has it wrong. These are supposed to be consecutive, meaning that I'm supposed to finish one sentence. Let's say it was a 2 to 4 year sentence. I would have to complete that 2 to 4 year sentence before I could begin the next 2 to 4 year sentence. That's called consecutive. It's end to end. It's like this. One sentence and then the next sentence. So that was my argument, that the Bureau had no ability to do that whatsoever. And the Supreme Court had already ruled on it, but this is the way this works. The Supreme Court, if you look at the decisions the Supreme Court makes, the Supreme Court is the de facto head of public policy in the United States. And public policy is, it's not a realm that's outside the law. It certainly includes everything, but it also includes things that really aren't or shouldn't be included in the law. So a lot of times the decisions that the Supreme Court makes are, people would call them political decisions, but they're not necessarily political in the sense of being partisan one way or the other. I think they consider themselves to be above that. I really do. But their decisions may lean one way or the other, or go on one side or the other, and then of course they get branded that way. And sometimes it is very apparent that there are biases and prejudice that's involved, even though they themselves would deny it. They would know they're lying. There's certain things you lie about, right? No matter what. If you're in a Senate Judiciary Hearing Committee on confirmation to the Supreme Court, and one of the senators asks you if you're biased against people of color, even if you are, you say, what do you say as a human that wants to advance their career and has this wonderful once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? You say, no, I'm not at all. I'll give fair measure to anybody. I'm not looking at names. I'm not looking at ethnicity or culture or race or any of that. Religion. I'm not taking any of that into factor. I'm looking solely at the facts, and then I'm going to apply the law. But, you know, and then they came out with, so Chevron is effectively dead. In other words, what this means is that the departments of government will no longer be given carte blanche to carry out the general statutory framework of the Congress. See, this is the way it works. When the Congress of the United States, the Senate and the House of Representatives, when they and the President signs off on it, they make a law. That becomes a statute. And that statute is usually written in very broad language. It's a very broad kind of language, usually, that whatever department is responsible for administering or enforcing or affecting that law, that statute, they will often make regulations that interpret how that statute is going to be applied. And this is called the Code of Federal Regulations. So that's how that breaks down. You end up with these agency-created regulations that are in effect laws, but they weren't created by the Congress of the United States with the President's approval or disapproval and overruled or whatever. They were created by administrative agencies solely. So this is why it comes back around full circle. You see my claim? Separation of powers. You can't have the executive branch making legislation. Simple as that. This should have been clear from the very beginning. This should have been, if you're going to run a tripartite system with a legislature and an executive branch and a judiciary, then you have to have separation of powers. You have to have, and it makes a lot of sense to have one body that makes the law, one body that implements the law, and another body that interprets the implementation of the law. So, yeah, it's that part of the system is good, strong. The principled sections, the theoretical divisions, but when you allow this to happen, it's been happening for a long time. So they knocked that down anyway. Chevron's pretty much gone. Now Congress is really going to have to do its job. When it makes laws, it's going to have to be a lot more definitive. But anyway, the other one was the Johnson versus Grants Pass, Oregon case, where living on the streets, or, here's the thing. Here's what they did was the Supreme Court said people that are homeless and sleep in public places, they can be fined. They can be jailed just for trying to exist in those public spaces, just for trying to occupy those public spaces long enough to sleep. That's what the Supreme Court just said, just did. So, everything has consequences, right? There's a ripple effect. And again, this goes back to what I said in the beginning about the Supreme Court being the head of, and really, I think to the highest degree, controlling the course of public policy. So yeah, that's what it is. It's the Supreme Court saying, in effect, we have to weigh out whether local police departments, cities, can run these people off or put them in jail in order to get them off the streets where they don't want them. I think what it does is, I think it creates a merry-go-round. I think that it's just, it's really nonsense. Most of the homelessness, the vast majority, occurs in the Ninth Circuit. I would have, if I was the Supreme Court, I would have just let that decision stand, because any way you look at it, the cities would have found alternative ways to try to manage it. You can't extinguish homelessness. There's no way you're getting rid of it. The only thing that you can do is try to manage it. That's all you can do, is try to manage it. And so, you got to come up with some good management techniques and let it go at that. The Supreme Court never should have took that case, because now what it says is we, i.e. the city, county, state, federal government, whatever, are at war, in effect, with people who live in tents or RVs or in their cars or on the streets for whatever reason. Anybody that's not living in a house somewhere, you're now marginalized. Your name, they're taking photos of people. They're taking photos and entering them into facial recognition systems so that those people can be denied benefits and services and, just any kind of consideration or respect whatsoever. This is a database that they're building all over this country. And look, it starts with the homeless population, right? Starts with those 700,000, 750,000 people across the United States who are living outside of a house or an apartment that is built stable and solid on a piece of land. But that number is going to grow. That number is bound to grow exponentially. Exponentially. So yeah, there's solutions. There's better ways, I think, to move this thing forward. But I think the Supreme Court just did it. I think they just did it. So we'll see. But I'll explain more about all of what really goes on behind the scenes in the next couple of videos. Appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure that you catch the great or the not so great debate. That's one of my videos that I put up about the Trump-Biden debate, and it was up well before the debate ever took place. But check it out.